Okay, Sam, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for doing this. Slightly different career talk this time around, not a finance related one, but to do with software development. And I'm sure students will be interested in this one. But just to kick us off, as always, would you want to give us a quick background of your academic and like career progression? Maybe kick us off with like A levels you picked and like why you picked them, and yeah, go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I picked maths, further maths, physics, and economics.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the reason I picked those subjects is because they're maths based, and that was the subject I enjoyed the most at GCSEs.
Yep.
I don't really have any deep reason behind it, but yeah, I picked those because it was what other friends were picking as well. I think at A level people don't really have a good, I don't know, they're not really thinking about further down the line like career or anything. But yeah,
Yeah.
they were mine.
So you weren't thinking about careers, it was just you enjoyed maths, and then you went and did maths at University of Bristol.
Yeah.
And I mean, when did you start thinking software development could be a career? Like, I mean, yeah, when, because I'm not even sure I know this. Like, when did you start thinking this could be a career I could go for?
Yeah, so I didn't really think about it until after uni. I think that the maths I learnt, all my whole uni experience was great, but it wasn't really career focused at all.
Mm,
I don't think any very much I learnt was that applicable to my career after. I
yeah,
think that the network and the people I met along the way were super useful. I think that
yeah,
was the biggest thing I gained from uni.
yeah.
Um, but it was actually after uni when I started going to these things called coding meetups.
Okay.
Um, so I did those.
Okay, so you didn't really know much about software development at university. Like, what sparked the interest in software development and coding?
Honestly, it was just what other people that I met were doing when I would just go to these meetups, and they'd be getting a job or they would
Okay.
be pursuing these sorts of things. So yeah. But yeah, and then a very common next step after that would be to join a coding boot camp. So there's quite a lot in London as well, if any of you are
So which
based in London.
which which boot camp did you join?
So I joined the Founders and Coders boot camp, which yeah, it's a really great boot camp. But I think that they're all quite similar. They're all like a couple of months long. Mine was 16 weeks.
Okay.
And
16
then
weeks.
what happens with that? 16 weeks, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Um, but actually it extended a lot longer than that. So I finished when I finished the boot camp as well.
Mm.
I there were no jobs lined up, so we just sort of continued on working in our teams on other projects just to try and learn and become better.
Okay.
And yeah, people were looking for jobs, but there really wasn't any at the end of the boot
So
camp.
just before we
Um,
go into the jobs though, so you're doing this boot camp. What languages are you learning? Are you learning like front end stuff, back end stuff, everything? Like, what are you learning?
so the boot camp I did was all JavaScript. I think
Okay.
every boot camp has at least a little bit of JavaScript, but some of them do Ruby. That's another popular one, or Python.
Okay.
Um, but if you're going to look to become a junior software engineer,
Yeah.
JavaScript is a really good one
Why
because
is that?
well, you can write on both the front end and the back end, whereas other languages, you can't write any front end code. So
Okay. Maybe just explain that actually, Sam.
sure.
Not sure what level people listening would be at, but maybe just explain the front end, back end, and like full stack developers, and what the differences are.
Sure. Okay. So the front end is basically when you visit a website, the language that is run by the browser is JavaScript. Um, and what JavaScript does is it makes pages interactive.
Mm.
So whenever you click a button, um, ju you'll trigger some JavaScript that will run behind the
Yep.
scenes.
Yep.
Um, so that the front end code is just what will run in browsers.
Okay.
Back end code is code that will run on servers or um, yeah, just in other places.
Okay.
So
And what's like an example of a back-end language kind of thing?
Well, I think Python, Ruby,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
JavaScript can be a backend language as well.
And full stack developers just are one people who know the front end and the back end.
Yeah, I mean, when you build a project, I mean
Yeah.
that you'll have to build both the front end and the back end. But
Fine.
so
Okay, fine.
you'll have the front end JavaScript that will, I guess, be sending requests to the back end, to
Okay.
your
Okay.
back end server code. So,
Okay, clear. So you go in this boot camp, you do the 16 weeks, looking for jobs, don't really see that many opportunities out there. So then what happens there? How did you get the first gig as a software developer?
yeah, so what we started doing, so there was 16 of us on the cohort. I think there was maybe two people that got jobs maybe within a month after finishing the boot camp.
Mm.
And the rest of us, we started doing these things called hackathons.
Yep.
So a hackathon is a great way just to build your network.
Mm.
We actually, we yeah, our group met some people who hired us later on at these hackathons. So it is a good place to, build that network.
But
But yeah,
your company that hired you went to these hackathons and saw the work you were doing.
yeah. So
Oh wow.
my first job, we met at one of these hackathons. So
Oh, that's super
yeah,
interesting. Okay.
yeah,
So
and
it's
it was great as well because we were
scouting.
there. Yeah, it was a bit of scouting, but it's also a good way just to learn about like what technology people are using, how people are building websites and apps.
Okay, interesting. So what company was that? The first company that you worked at?
Yeah, it was. It was called IP Cortex. It was quite a
IP Boutique.
small
Okay.
company, but
And I remember when
yeah, and
you when you I think first started as a software developer, Sam, like I remember one of the like projects that you're working on was on an airline's app, and I thought it was super cool. Could you maybe just like talk about what kind of things you did there? Like why does an airline how does an airline use software developers? Like what kind of stuff are you doing with it for them?
so I never worked for an airline, but I worked for Thomas Cook. Um, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, sorry.
That's
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
very good.
So
Heard of
yeah,
yeah.
I worked for Thomas Cook. It was just before they went into liquidation. I worked for them for maybe a year or so, and
Okay.
then I think the next year they went into liquidation. So that was a really fun experience. Um,
But what kind
I
of things
found that
you're
job.
working on you're working on their app?
So we were trying to build financial services for Thomas Cook. There was we were trying to build this project called Thomas Cook Money. Was what we're trying to build.
On an app or on their website or
It was going to be an app eventually, but we built it as a website first,
in,
to trial.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. And okay, interesting. And so like when you're given that kind of thing, you're working in teams, right? And like you're taking
Mm.
certain chunks and using some code to do that. Like explain just how it works a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I've always worked in a multidisciplinary team. So the way it will work is there'll be requirements that will be put together by some sort of project manager. Then they'll be fed through to the designers. The designers will come up with maybe a prototype using something like Figma.
Okay.
I know you've used Figma a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah, so Figma is a great way just to get an idea of the look and feel of the app as well
Yeah.
as how the features will behave. And then that will be passed on to the developers who will build it.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
you just iterate from there. So,
Interesting. So then how many developers will be working on it from there?
I mean, it can really vary, but we worked on a greenfield project, um, and I think there was a few too many. But it would be good to have maybe a handful or so at the beginning when you're building out a greenfield project.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so, but as well, we had people in the team who specialized in different areas. So we had some people who were very back end focused. When I
Okay.
joined Thomas Cook Money, I was a front end engineer, so everything I did was just in the web,
Okay.
on the website. So yeah,
So how did you
but
learn? But you knew the back end stuff, but you only did front end stuff.
yeah, I mean, when you work on the front end, you have to be aware of how the back end works.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
You have to have that holistic view. But as a junior developer, you're going to be, I mean, it's typically the most experienced people should work on the back end because that's the hardest to get right. There's the most problems.
Okay.
Whereas the front end, um, yeah, it moves faster. There's more parts that can just change quickly, and
Okay.
you can
Interesting.
be more junior, I'd say.
Okay. Um. Okay. Then you go on from Thomas Cook, and currently you're working for what was the company called?
So I work for RVU, which is the umbrella company for a few price comparison websites
That's
among
it.
other companies.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
money.co.uk
So
is one of them, right?
so money.co.uk is one. Then
Yeah.
there's uswitch.com
Yeah.
and confused.com.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's others, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. But yeah, they're the main ones. They're the ones that I work on. So yeah.
So what do you actually do? What is your like average day, and like what are you employed to actually do for this company?
Yeah, sure. I can talk you through an average day.
Yeah.
So typically we'll start the day with a morning stand up. So a
Okay.
stand up is where, so if we're in the office, we'll actually physically stand up in a room together and go through our project board. So
Right.
we use a tool called Jira, which is for project
Right.
management, and we'll have tickets assigned to everyone, and we'll go through our tickets, make sure that no one's blocked. And
Right.
again, this is a multidisciplinary team, so we'll
Yeah.
make sure that everyone's talking from the same hymn sheet.
Yep.
And then if I'm working on a bug, I could be working on maybe a bug, a new feature, or something maybe more technical that doesn't really have you know impacts to the user. Um,
Right.
the way I tend to work is will be we tend to do a lot of pairing. So
Okay.
that would be I'll sit with other people in the team and we'll solve these problems together, and that
Interesting.
promotes like sharing knowledge and making sure that everyone's aligned, which is really good.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, an average day will be lots of just aligning with people, making sure we're all building towards the right it going in the right direction.
So,
And
so,
yeah, just
so
trying to put output value. Yeah.
I mean, I am probably as like clueless about software development as most kind of students who
Sure,
aren't
sure.
familiar with it. But like, who decides like what a project should be, and like how much of your time, like you just talked about fixing bugs, like how much of your time is just maintenance of a website and like maintaining like, everything to working smoothly versus creating new features and new kind of components for a website?
Yeah. So there's a maintenance side of things, which I think shouldn't be confused with bugs. Like fixing bugs is a separate thing. Like
Right.
maintaining software is, I mean, like people can spend maybe 10 to 30% of their time on something called tech debt, which is um, essentially tidying up floppy code that you might have written just to get a feature over the line or
Okay.
to get a feature out. And then there's the fixing bugs part of things, and then there's actually shipping features.
So, so,
Um, but in
so
terms of
for like a price comparison site, what would be like a feature? You don't have to talk about one of the companies you talk about, but like for a price comparison, what would be like a
yeah,
feature a development team would work on?
sure, yeah. So we might have a new provider that might come on board that might have requirements. So we might be partnering with someone who may want their own page or their own um, like branding. So they may say, we want to be on this page with this branding. Can you do that for us? And we'll either compromise and try and come to some middle ground, and then we'll build it out for them.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah,
Interesting.
and yeah, each third party might have their own look and feel. So we'll try and make that happen as best as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Another big feature that I guess we're working on at the moment is we're trying to build this thing called a savings club. So
Okay.
at the moment, yeah, money.co.uk just serves up. Um, so it serves up the best products that we think are in the market and compares them.
Mm.
But what we want to be able to do in the future is have more bespoke like products for each individual. So
Mhm.
this is a really cool thing would be you can input your preferences
Mm.
um, and your information, and then you can get results that will be catered to you. So that's this thing, and we're calling it a savings club.
So
So yeah,
interesting. So I mean, with price comparison sites, just like so I'm clear, you guys are like I'd go on and I'd look at maybe like an insurance provider, and you'd have the different like comparisons of different providers, and if I click on a certain provider, how do like so price comparison sites then make money from people clicking on those links?
yeah, that's how we bring in our money. Yeah,
Okay,
um,
interesting.
yeah. So I mean that will all be negotiated with the third party. We'll agree on a price, and then every time someone clicks on the link, we'll
Mm.
have a certain price, and then um, when users convert,
And so
yeah,
and so and so and so,
that's how we.
and so I guess all of that stuff that happens with us thinking, like clicking on that button, and then you know that kind of like you guys like gaining revenue from that and stuff. That all requires JavaScript to make that action of like clicking the button something happening. Is that right? Or
Um, well, I mean, it's essentially yeah. Maybe we use JavaScript, or maybe there's another way we do it, but um, essentially we will be tracking, what's happening behind the scenes.
okay,
Um, yeah, it's one way or another. But yeah, a big part of what we do is tracking and analyzing the data,
okay.
and yeah, making sure everything's profitable. So what like there are some domains that we'll have up. So on money.co.uk, we deal with loans, insurance,
Mm,
pensions,
mm,
mortgages, credit cards, all these things. And for instance, one of those domains might not be profitable,
mm.
but so we'll try and maybe direct traffic not to the ones that aren't as profitable, but
How would
we've
you
got to
direct?
have
How
we've
would
got
you
to be
direct
a
traffic?
holistic.
How would you direct traffic to the more profitable ones?
Yeah. So the way that we have traffic come into money.co.uk is through brand exposure.
Okay.
So we might try and target users through news articles or interviews or an
Mm.
uh, emails or um, yeah, what's another? So SEO is a big one. We're
Okay.
really big into
So
SEO.
just talk to me a little bit
Um,
about SEO because I know you do quite a bit with SEO and search engine optimization and like what kind of like things does a software developer kind of like need to do with SEO?
yeah. So a big part of SEO is actually the content itself. So Google will scrape our pages, digest the content in some way, and
Mm.
then try and work out if we're offering, if our offering is, one they would want to highly rank or not.
Okay, okay,
Um,
okay.
so a big part of it is content, but another big part of it is how well you've built your pages. So Google have a spec for how they want web pages to be built. So if you're building your pages well, then Google will recognize that and rank you highly. One
Right.
thing that's really great though is that Google give you all this information. So they'll tell you where you're ranked, your average ranks based on these words you've put in, all this information that they'll tell you all of this.
Right, right, right,
Um,
right.
you can also pay for keywords as well.
Okay.
So yeah, so
So, so,
we'll
so, for instance,
pay.
so for
Yeah,
instance, Sam, like when if we just flip it to Disney because that's the company we've been talking about this week.
yeah,
Like
yeah, cool.
Disney, I'm sure, have plenty of software engineers. They have plenty of like SEO activity going on. Like, if I typed in streaming into Google, are Disney paying Google for like high like keywords to get high up on that page? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so they'll be paying for the keyword streaming. Yeah, that they'll pay so that they'll be ranked higher on Google search for that
Okay.
word streaming. Yeah.
And that's what the role of the software development team to be doing that.
Well, there's
Or
one
is
team
that
that
more of a
will.
marketing team, or how does what who does that lie under?
Yeah, so the marketing team will be working with it. in some way, so that they'll be overseeing a lot of it,
Mm.
but a lot of it will be automated.
Okay.
So, I mean, one thing that will be being done is they'll be tracking the conversions. So if a keyword isn't ranking well,
Mm.
then you'll reduce the spend on it,
Okay, 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 okay.
and all of that is being tracked. So
Okay, interesting.
yeah,
I guess one other question I have with Disney and software development is, obviously they've plunged into streaming with Disney Plus. Like, how much
yeah.
software development is involved in that? Like, to get like what languages and stuff is needed to help with that process?
Say the question again. Sorry.
So what kind
With
of language?
streaming.
Yeah, for streaming. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I haven't actually worked too much with streaming,
Okay.
but I mean, essentially, you need to be sending through yeah, chunks of the video, because I guess sending a whole video,
Mm.
to the browser would be, too much. You don't want to have to wait till the entire film has been uploaded to your browser before you can start watching it. It
Mm.
might be too much. So you
Mm.
want to send chunks to the browser. So I guess that's what streaming would be.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I haven't worked much with that, but you'd build a server that would handle that well, so that when you click to watch a film, you'd send a request to the Disney servers. The Disney servers would start sending you little chunks of the video, and then you'll slowly start playing it. The browser would have a way to to make that happen.
Okay. 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 Super interesting. Yeah. I guess okay. Moving away from kind of like last kind of question in terms of like work and the job in particular. Like, what do you enjoy and not so enjoy about the role? And yeah, and there are there's one specific follow up I have, but I'll let you just crack on first with that.
Yeah, sure. What do I enjoy? Well, I enjoy the way that we solve problems. So I'll be given a problem to work on, and I'll try and tackle it myself.
Mm.
If I'm able to do it, that's great. But if not, I'll maybe pair with someone, which is quite nice. So you can like share your ideas how you might solve a problem, and then there'll be other people in the company that you can escalate the problem to, and it can eventually get escalated and escalated until you realize, okay, we can't solve the problem. Then you have to
Mm.
compromise, or you can solve it together, which is really nice.
Okay.
So that's I enjoy how we solve problems. So
Okay,
yeah.
nice. I guess one thing, yeah, I wanted to follow up with is when you were doing the contracting software development role, like you went to
Yeah.
Thailand for 3 months or something. I remember with Tom, like it's a role which offers a fair amount of flexibility. If you're contracting, because you can work for like 6 months at a time, then take some time off, then work 6 months. Like that's correct, right?
I mean, I don't think that's any so contracting in terms of the freedom to work remotely. I don't think it would be too different from a just a permanent role. But software engineers in general, they can work remotely quite well. Um, I
Wait, were
think
you working when you were in Thailand?
I worked abroad quite a lot. Yeah,
Okay,
um,
okay, okay.
yeah, I did some work abroad. I don't think in Thailand, but I've worked from Portugal, South Africa, lots of different
Ah, nice. So I
Morocco.
guess like that remote working is obviously a clear.
Yeah, I,
Right.
I would say software engineers have some of the best remote working, like cultural or yeah practices in terms of relative to other jobs. I would say.
Okay, nice. And then in terms of like work-life balance, like we've had some finance people on here talk about their horror stories. Like, what are your hours as a
Yeah.
software developer?
So at the moment they're really nice. So where I work, understand that you can't just be focused on output and working people to the bone,
Mm.
um, which is great. But I have worked in other places where it's all about output,
Mm.
and yeah, I think it's good to join a company where the culture is, you know, understands that you need to have a break sometimes,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you need to make sure you've got your lunch break and you have time to socialize. and stuff. So one thing we've got like weekly check-ins, which is really nice.
Okay.
So it's not all about just sitting at your desk trying to output as much as possible. A
Mhm.
lot of it is making sure you do spend time with other people in your team to actually just chat for
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
20
yeah.
minutes, half an hour.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it comes with the company culture.
And it's fairly 9 to 5, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'm 9 till 5:30, but yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Although one thing I would say is that we have had instance where if the website goes down or if there's an issue with it,
Mm.
obviously you'll be expected to stay late. And if something goes down during the weekend, you'll have to, you'll go online and have to fix it or escalate it to someone else in the company.
What if it goes
Um,
down in the middle of the
so
night?
yeah. So someone's always on call. So at our company, there's always someone who's on call. Um, and
Are you
I,
sometimes on call?
people,
And if the website goes down in the middle of the night, you
not.
to get it.
I mean, someone would be contacted. The thing is that, yeah, well, obviously I'd have my phone off, but like there are people in the company who would be contactable at midnight. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. One of the follow-up I had about like what you enjoy and also enjoy about the role is software developers, especially contractors. I was amazed when I first found out how much contractors get paid. Like, why is it, do you think they get paid so much? Is it because there's such a high demand for the skills of a software developers? There's not enough supply. Like, why is like daily rate what it is? And maybe you can talk about what the average like industry kind of rate is for a developer, and yeah, your thoughts there.
Yeah, sure. So I think it might be because software scales. So if you're trying to reach, if you build some software, it can be used by millions of people.
Mm,
So that might be one reason why it's so highly paid.
mm,
I think it's also really hard to build good software as well.
mm,
And I think as well, money doesn't always correlate to building good software.
mm,
Like if you take the airline industry, for instance, airline apps are notoriously bad. And they've got as much money to throw at apps as they would ever need. But
mm.
I just think that I mean, there's been lots of case studies on it, but they're not really built very well.
Interesting.
Whereas if you were to take, some computer science grads who are super enthusiastic and pay them not very much, but give
Mm,
them a great culture to work in, I think
mm.
they would build, better airline apps, for instance.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Okay. Okay. And maybe just for enthusiastic um students, like what what is kind of like the average kind of rate for like a contractor in the industry?
for a contractor, I would say upwards of so a day rate would be upwards of £500 a day. But
Yeah, give me £500 a day.
I mean, it would be upwards of that. That would be a good starting one. But
And how
I
serious
mean,
are you for that?
it really depends on how well you network. But I think it's about who you know as opposed to how senior you are.
Right. Okay.
Um, but
Interesting.
yeah,
I mean, £500 a day,
it
you can
it can get
like
very high though. So
yeah, £500 a day times by five is what, 2.5 grand a week, like 10 grand a month. Like that's what I was amazed when I found those numbers out. That's pretty, yeah, impressive, I guess. Okay, so moving on to some slightly softer skills, Sam. So are there any kind of like there might be people here who like the idea of coding, who maybe have dabbled in Python and thinking, should I, they might have done a master's degree like yourself, and then thinking, should I go into finance? Should I go into software development? Like, are there any kind of like courses you'd recommend, like aspiring software developers? You obviously did the boot camp after graduating, but like people who are undergrads, is there anything that they could do during the holidays or during uni or school, like in certain languages they should prioritize? What are your thoughts?
yeah. Well, I would say even if you were going to go into finance, learning Python or a coding language would be really good, just because it will teach you a lot. It will teach you some really useful skills that would be applicable, I think, even in whatever job you take in finance. I think they will always be there.
Mm.
Um, in terms of courses, so Code Academy is a really great free one.
Okay.
Udemy courses are really great.
Yeah.
There's lots of meetups you can go to as well where you can learn to code. Um,
Are there any
and
particular
honestly,
languages?
I mean, Python is a great language.
Okay, Python. Okay.
JavaScript is a great language as well.
Okay.
But honestly, if you just get a coding book, and like the O'Reilly books are really good,
Okay.
and just work through that, you'll
I
you'll,
mean,
you'll learn a lot.
I would 100% say, like you said, if people even going into finance, is I was watching the Y Combinator video, the one that got released a couple of days ago, and they were saying like it's an absolute no-brainer. If I could go back now 10 years, it's an absolute no-brainer for me that I would learn something to do with coding because even with the business of, like, I'm not sure a lot of people are aware, like, just like for the website to be how it is, to have the archive, to have like people putting in their email address, takes a lot of coding, like, takes a lot of like skill from like your end. And if you don't have like a technical person, it's very hard to start any business unless you're selling something out your boot of your car. So, like, I 100% agree. Like, I think so Python, JavaScript, probably the ones it sounds like you're saying. Um, Next thing I wanted to kind of ask was like, are there any kind of like personal skills or yeah, just traits that you think are important to develop to be a good software developer?
Yeah, I mean, this one may not sound typical for software engineers, but I think communication is really good.
Great.
But more the written communication, because the code you write is actually read by other software engineers. So if you can write well, that's a good trait. I've worked with lots of people who are good at languages, so actually, um, there's that part of it.
So you mean
Patience is a
what do
good
you
one.
what was the second one? Patience, you said.
Patience, yeah, and persistence.
I'll come on to the patience thing, but like in terms of the communication, what do you mean in terms of like because you're working in a team, like what you write, they need to be able to understand. But how would a student develop that without knowing code?
Well, I mean, I guess it would only come from working on code, but yeah, I guess when you work in a team, you need to be able to communicate with other people in the team. So when you describe a task to solve, you
Hmm.
know, let's just say a project manager says, "I want this done." If you don't describe it well enough, the engineer is not going to build it well. So it's you know, you have to be good at describing things. So
So I guess that if a student or something was interviewing for a role and stuff, they could be talking about things like, listen, I've like led these teams, I've worked in these teams and communicated and got my point across, and that those would be nice transferable skills for this role.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I
Okay.
think teamwork is a big one in software.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, and then in terms of the patience and persistence, I can definitely vouch for this because I do not think I would be a very good software engineer because I see you work on things for the business of and like sometimes I think this would be super interesting for like students to know is that like you you'd be like, okay, let's move the margin out a bit or in a bit, let's move this title here or there, let's add this feature to the website. And sometimes you'd just Google how to go do it. And I'll be like, shouldn't he know how this works? And you're like, no, because the part of the job is that like you don't know everything. You go and figure it out. Part of the skill of the job is going to Google, knowing where to go find the information. Like, but I find that so weird. I'd be like, shouldn't software developers know that? But was that like weird for you when you first joined, or was it quite natural for you? Because I think it's very different to how we,
Yeah.
like when we do exams and stuff. It's like here's everything you need to know. It's in this textbook. You learn the textbook, you got it. Whereas that is not how software development works.
No, I mean, it's really common in software that, like, for instance, when we're interviewing people at RVU, where I'm working at the moment, we'll often say this is an open book, um,
Mm.
you know, interview. So whenever you want to, when we're doing a coding test, people can open up Google and just Google things, and we'll see how they work. It's a big part of our job is to be good at being able to find the answer through Google, or Stack Overflow is another good resource.
Okay, okay,
But yeah, that's really common.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So I guess communication and patience. Here's something, at RVU, like when you're looking for grad students and things like that, like what do you think grad students could be doing to, you know, help them stand out in applications and stuff?
Um, Honestly, working on your own side projects is a really big one. I think when we interview people, we'll hear about the projects that they've worked on in their past experience and what they've built in other teams, which is really great. I mean, that's probably the number one thing for us is just past experience. But having a side project really makes someone stand out, and anyone can work on that. You don't need to have a good network or get in or have anything else. You can build a side project, in your own time. So I
So
would say that.
why? What does that show? Just a determination and like an interest in the subject, or
Well, I think it just shows competence. Like you have to understand every element of the system. Because if you work in a team, you could have gaps in your knowledge. Whereas when you work on your own side projects, you have to know how to do every part of it. So
it's like, I guess for the business of, you have to do the front end stuff, and you also need to know back end
yeah.
stuff, all the data and all that stuff. So, okay, I get it. That's super interesting. So, okay, that's cool. Okay, last couple of questions, Sam. I don't want to take too much more of your time. Like, if you had to go back, is there any advice that you'd give yourself to maybe do things like differently, or I mean, and not in terms of like like changing the future or changing the past or anything. I'm sure you are pretty happy with how things have turned out. But is there any kind of advice that you'd give a student who's 10 years back, like who's thinking about their career or yeah, dipping their toes in? Any advice you give?
Um, well, I mean, yeah, it's advice for what age is a 16-year-old or
16
18-year-old?
performers who or undergrads up to 21, 16 to 21, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they're 16 to 21, I would say like for a uni, I've always worked, and even before uni, like when I was doing my A levels, I was always working. I'd say a good working mentality is good. Um, so yeah, take up a part-time job. Take up, you know, I did tutoring and bar work and
Mhm.
lifeguarding,
Mhm.
all sorts of odd jobs. But I would say, yeah, work when you can. I think that teaches you a lot of good skills and accountability and responsibility. So I'd
Okay,
say that.
nice. Um, okay, last kind of question. If not software development, what other careers do you think you would have pursued?
Oh, I thought you were going to phrase it in a different way. So I was going to answer. I don't know if this will still fit your phrasing, but I was
Yeah.
going to say a water polo player, because that's something that I do all
Oh,
the
so
time
you
at the
okay, so
moment.
you would have tried to
But
become more professional. You would try to become professional water player.
well, yeah, but I think the only issue is that there's just no money in it at all. But if
Okay.
if that was if it was like a different universe that that was like a well-paid profession, then I'd go into doing that. But yeah, if it was going to be like a a job like in this current universe, I'd say
Yeah.
maybe a carpenter or something.
A carpenter.
Um, yeah, because the job satisfaction would be so high. You're creating and building things, and
It's super
yeah.
interesting, this actually. It's probably an interesting way to end because I think students will get like a wide variety of, and I think this is what's really important is that like there are other ways to make money outside of finance and like consulting and things like that. Like we've
Mm,
talked about software development, like contractors, how much they earn and things, and the work-life balance is a lot better. Um, and you just have people with different priorities. Like when I look at some of my friends in finance and when I look at some of my friends in software development and other kind of careers, it's like it is down to, and I think Nacho spoke about this in his career talks. It's a very personal thing. It's what do you want in your life, and like I think it's if students can answer that as early as possible, it will help them. And doing things like you said, like working, getting experience, like learning things, skills about yourself, will help. So an interesting answer. I wasn't expecting that, mate.
yeah, I should have given you a heads up there. You look quite shocked.
No
Yeah.
offense to carpenters. I think it's a great profession.
No, it's great.
Yeah. Sam, mate, that's everything I have today. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm sure this will help students who are interested, thinking about software development. And yeah, mate, thanks for your time. And you need to put this on the archive tomorrow when this goes out. So yeah.
Will do, Nige, and thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.